Well, hello. Welcome back to the Guitar Gym for Rookies. Believe it or not, this is week number 7. We've been plowing through some really good introductory things that felt like I wanted to put together a 10-week course that really covers a lot of the real fundamental things that you need to play guitar if you have all the passion in the world and not sure what to practice, and what are some of the shortcuts as you're practicing. That's what this whole course is about. So if you're just tuning in now, awesome. If you've been with us through the whole thing, you should get a trophy. At the end of it, you got to stay for all 10 weeks. But I've had a blast arranging all of these exercises for you, and I hope this has been helpful in many different ways. Today, I want to talk about arpeggios and just get into what they are, what are some of the interesting ways that you can use them, and some good exercises that are not just here's a G major, here's an E minor, some that have a little bit more color and texture and character to them. Here in the Guitar Gym for Rookies, we've been talking a lot about finding the real, not just training, not just practicing, but making sure that we're training smart, you know. And so part of what we did in the previous lessons and talking about chords and pick technique, all of that will sort of come into focus here, and we'll be putting those over some different scenarios. So it's still important to make sure that you have a good pick technique, a good fundamental understanding of how chords are built. You can refer back to the chords lesson and some of the things we went through there. But again, making sure we train smart, and that you're not just doing busy work, that you're working on a couple of different levels of things at the same time, and by doing so you see more progress. I think it's really important to make sure that you keep your will ignited as you grow as a player. That passion right out the gate when you get your first guitar, and can really just steamroll almost any frustration. You know, when I first started, I was just so excited to play. I didn't care if my strings were 2 inches off the fretboard on this old garage sale special. Not this anymore. This is my pristine Schwartz guitar. But after a while, you know, as you start to see some of the more difficult things come into focus, and maybe your instrument is a little bit harder to play, you know, you can sort of lose that focus. It's very important to train smart, but to keep that will engaged and alive. And so I want to remind you of that as we progress. Today we're going to be doing some more complex things than we've done in the past. So I don't want you to get discouraged. I just wanted to remind you off the bat to remember why you started. And if there's that one guitar solo you saw a video of years ago, or that one player, that solo from that record, or just a whole record, you know, an old Beatles record or whatever, make sure that you routinely go back to the things that ignited and made you excited to start playing, and stay in touch with those roots, because again, it's important not to just put in your time, but to train smart and to make sure you keep your passion and will alive, because then you will be, you know, you are unstoppable with all of those things at play. So we will grab our pick, and today I want to talk about, you know, what is an arpeggio. We're going to go through 8 exercises as we do each time here. We're going to talk about, similar to what we did with our major scale and our pentatonic scale lessons, where we broke it down into 1 octave, then sort of split it, you know, blew it out into 2 octaves and then up to 3 octaves, and starting to see some of these shapes come together on the fretboard. So that's the intro. Enough of my yapping. Let's just hop on to it. Everybody say hello, Jason. Jason is with us again at Jam Play. Wonderful folks there. Thank you so much for putting this on. So let's look at exercise number 1. So with number 1, well, you grab your pick, right? And we talked about in the picking lesson, making sure you have a good solid pick holding technique that doesn't shift as you play. I remember when I first started, I tended to hold the pick a little bit closer to like this, and then as I was playing, you know, the pick would start turning. So just a reminder to make sure that you put some thought into how you're holding the pick, to see if any of these small inefficiencies start to snowball and become real emotional frustrations while you're playing. You know, sometimes it can come back to these simple things. So how you're holding your pick. I tend to do the thumb crisscross, right? The thumb pointing this way, the index pointing the other way. And I have nails for fingerstyle, so I have to be extra careful that the nails don't get in the way as I'm doing the pick. But just take a moment right now to analyze how you're holding your pick, because we're going to rely on the comfort and sort of autopilot of that position as we progress through. This very first exercise is a G major 7, just a single octave. And this is one of the very first arpeggios that I ever learned. And I always love the sound of it, so I think this is kind of a good place to start. And what's great about this is you can move it anywhere on the fretboard. Some of these will have, I think we'll have some that have open strings, but otherwise these will be able to shift pretty much anywhere. So what you'll see written on the tab, if you look closely, there is a downstroke, down, 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 all the way till you get to measure number 2. And in measure number 2, there's that caret, right? That's opening up, right? So that's your upstroke. And then we have a pull off, and then you go up and up. So when I first learned this, I used to do down, up, down, up. We talked about that alternate picking. And that's great to do, that's fine. I want to make sure that you're comfortable doing that. But I want to try something a little bit different, and we touched on this in the picking lesson about what sweep picking is. Sweep picking, usually when you see people do it, it's kind of this, you know, this shredding, and their fingers are moving incredibly fast all over the fretboard. But you don't have to play fast. Sweep picking can also be a really nice sound played slowly. The best way to explain what is happening here is it's not taking a break as you cross to each string. The idea is thinking about a slow strum. If you were to strum an E minor chord, we go to E minor here, what you typically don't do is this, right? Pick individual notes, da 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 da, right? What you're doing is you're actually sort of just dragging the finger, dragging your pick all the way through the strings, right? And it's sort of just cutting right through the strings, but it's relaxed, it's not getting stuck, it's just kind of strumming, move the pick all the way to the ground. What we're doing with sweep picking is similar to that. We're kind of doing a slow strum, and yet things are moving on the left hand. Whereas before, you're just keeping this one chord that you've decided completely intact, and then the rest of it is just strumming however fast or slow you want to on this hand. But what you want to try to get used to, and don't worry if this feels a little bit tricky at first, but make sure that you lazily go through each string and bump into the next one, right? Just like you do on a strum, so like this, right? And all we're doing, so you're going to take your pinky on the 5th fret, and then you're going to go your 3rd finger, your ring finger, on the 4th fret of the G, and then your 2nd finger is going to go on the B string on the 3rd fret, and then your 1st finger goes all the way up here. So you're kind of making this cool shape. It's just this right in a row. And if you'll remember back to our chord lesson, this is sort of the shape that we do instead of, if you have a hard time doing an F bar chord, right? You can just lift this finger off and you get that nice sound. So all we're doing is sort of taking that shape and just moving it up here. Now what we're doing is making sure that each individual note is played, but we're not holding it like a chord, like this, okay? What we're gonna do is gonna go, okay, so each individual note at a time. And remember, with this hand, really just focus on dragging the finger to the next, to the next, to the next. And now what you want to do is take your 2nd finger, and we're going to go on the 3rd fret of the high E. So we're going to go up on that, and then pull that off right there. And one thing I'll say about pull-offs is, remember, as guitar players, we always want to do this. Whatever we learn, we want to play as fast as possible, as quickly as possible. And this is one of those things where, again, we're not playing the sweep picking part really, really fast. We're using it for the sound, the texture, the effect, the character The same thing with the pull off. Make sure you don't do all those fast. It's still keeping in the rhythm. Okay? Now you'll notice in measure number 2, when we go back, we're going to go 3, then pull off the 2, and then go. That pull off means this can take a break. You don't have to worry, but just get it in the next, in the range of the next string, right? You go up, and you can go back to the down again on 5, because you'll see we have a loop. You know, the repeats will go back and forth. Right? Or you can stay up. It doesn't matter. That last note can be whatever's most comfortable for you. So that's okay to do an upstroke or a down. The whole idea is just making sure that you can play with a, play to a beat, play with a good sense of rhythm, and not feeling like you're getting stuck on each individual string. If you feel like you are, usually the number one thing is that you squeeze the pick too hard. And usually when we play something that's a little bit difficult at first, we tend to just brace for impact, right? We want to will our way through the exercise. But guitar playing, progress in guitar playing is a process of subtraction, right? So subtract the tension in this hand, all the mental RAM going to all the things that you have to focus on. You really want to try to just simplify. Get to the core of the idea. And the core is, remember, coming back to the picking hand holding, but making sure you're not squeezing the pick too hard. And that should make a big difference. So now we're going to do this. I have this, the tab says listed at 120 beats per minute, but I want to do these at 60 today, all right? So let's get the metronome going here. 60 beats per minute. There we go. 1, 2, ready, go. Excellent. So what's going on here? What is an arpeggio? An arpeggio is just like a chord, right? A chord is usually built. Remember back to our chord lesson. A chord is built when you have root, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seven, eight. When you're playing a major scale, and that's our do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. What we're doing to build a chord is we're actually hopping over the next one in the sequence. That's what builds a stack sound. So what do I mean by that? We're going to play the root, then we're going to skip the second, we're going to go to the third, we're going to skip the fourth, and then we're going to play the fifth. And that gets you a stacked sound like this. All right? And that would be a G major, a G, a B, and a D. And that would be your root, third, fifth. If you want to add an extra one on top of there, you would have to do a seventh, right? So you'd play the root, skip the second. Play the third, skip the fourth. Play the fifth, skip the sixth, and then play the seventh. And you'd have to do a little bit of finagling. The easiest way to see is probably on a C major chord like this. You would just put this. Just have to play that. This chord is easy to see how it's stacked. You have a root, a third, a fifth, and then the seventh is up here. And then anything above that is called an extension, which means it goes into a higher octave of the scale, and that means you can get some really interesting things. Right? Those kind. It gets you a little bit more color. But the whole idea with that is we're building chords and arpeggios the same way. The difference between chords and arpeggios is arpeggios are played one note at a time. That's it. And chords are played as a cluster altogether. So if you'll see written a cluster of a chord in tab, or if you see in the standard notation, right, it's all in one row, right? So it's very vertical there, and it's just this big cluster, and it looks a little intimidating at first. But then you see the arpeggio can be playing the same notes, but they're just broken apart. So they're more horizontal, right? Right, that would be the arpeggio. What we want to do, getting comfortable with chords now, is when we build into arpeggios with a chord, you're really sort of limited toward keeping things stable as much as possible. With an arpeggio, if our focus is getting the sort of ingredients or the notes that make up the chord, but we have the freedom to play them split apart, not as a cluster, then that gives us a little bit more freedom around the fretboard to play those chords or those arpeggios, right? So that's where this is from. This is a root, here's a third, here's a fifth, and here's a 7 in the G major 7. Just like that. So that's where that comes from. If you heard, just so you get an idea of what the difference between the chord and arpeggio is, that's it, broken apart or cluster sort of played together for a chord. So what we want to do is look at number 2 now. So number 2 is an A minor 7, and this is going to be in 2 octaves. So you're going to start with your first finger here, right? Put your first finger on the 5th fret of the low E, and then you're going to go to the 8th fret of the low E, and then your third finger is going to go on the 7th fret, right? On the 7th fret of the A, and then your first finger is all the way on the 5th fret of the D. And for this, I'm not going to be using the sweep picking. You can if you would like. We'll do the rest of these, I think, will be in alternate picking, but sometimes it's good to go back and forth so you're comfortable playing the sweep picking pattern or the alternate picking or the economy picking. It's really up to your preference here. We'll go through the rest of this with the alternate picking. So 5th fret, 8th fret, then you have 7, and then we have the 5th fret here, and then 7. There's our first octave. And this sort of feels similar to what we did with the pentatonic scales, right? We're just choosing different notes. The arpeggio is different than the pentatonic scale. Because remember, we're playing the chord tones, not just the scale part. Okay, and then the next one is you're going to go to the 7 here, and then the 5th fret here, the 5, and then the 5th fret, and then the 8th, and then all the way up on the 5th fret here. Now one thing you'll notice in the second measure there is you have a 5 and a 5 on the same string. I'm sorry, on the same fret, but on different strings. And here's where it gets a little interesting with arpeggios. Getting comfortable with this sort of roll technique, right? And that means that you'd start on the 5th fret of the G, sort of on the tip of the finger, and then you flatten the finger here just to grab on the other side. So like the tip of the finger here, and then when you flatten it, it's the next string is going to grab this part, the flat part of the finger. And that's what gives you 2 distinct notes that are not just a bar. It's not a bar, it's a roll. Not a bar, a roll. Okay, that's how we get all the way up to here. So what we want to do now is start here. Roll that. That's coming from an A minor. And again, this is great because you can switch it anywhere. Right, to do B minor or just wherever you want to move this, but we'll do this in A minor. Okay, so let's try this at 60 beats per minute. Oh, we have a question come through here. What guitar are you playing? This guitar is made by the genius luthier named Sheldon Schwartz from Toronto, Ontario. Look him up, Schwartz Guitars, SCHWARTZ Guitars. It's got a bear claw Sitka spruce. It's got this really cool kind of effect to it, and then Indian rosewood back and sides. And we spent a couple of years getting the measurements right and making sure that it's completely, just out of this world, the best it can be. And every one of his guitars are. So look them up, schwartzguitars.com. All right, so here we go. Number 2 at 60 beats per minute. 1, 2, ready, go. Going again. Remember that finger roll. So flat, tip there. One more time. So remember, with that finger roll technique, on your way up, you're ascending, right? As we're going up in pitch, obviously, going down towards the floor with the strings thicker to thinnest. You want to make sure you start with on the index part a little bit more on the tip, so that you have a little bit more room to flatten your finger. If you notice that as you're playing this, you're already kind of flat like this, double check where your thumb is. Because as you can see, if the thumb is all the way up here, you have no other options than to do a bar. You don't actually have room on your finger to roll back and forth. So analyze where your thumb is and also where your elbow is. Because sometimes if you're used to playing with your elbow resting on your knee, like we said before, that can cause some issues as well, and you don't have as much mobility. So check your thumb position, check your elbow, and then check your wrist position, because you may be in good position here, your elbow might be free, but the wrist is kind of curved back. So again, you want to make sure you get a little bit more arched this way, so your wrist is coming this way a little bit more. And then on your way back down, you have to, and this is probably the hardest part about this, is you have to actually start with the flat finger so that you can go to the tip on the way back down. So start on the flat part, and I'll try to you can see there's a little groove in the middle of the finger there. And then go to the index there. All right. And that's a very important technique, just learning how to do that finger roll. A lot of times that's not discussed when, especially when I first was learning arpeggios, it was sort of figured out as you go. And then some of the notes sounded really short and staccato to me. And then some of them felt like they turned into a chord. And you want to just look for making sure each note sounds even in quality and in duration. And that's a way to do it with that flat finger approach. Okay, so number 3 here. This is a really nice one because we're getting into some more color. And this is a C major 9 in 2 different octaves. And if you look at the tab here, we're starting with the 2nd finger on the 3rd fret. Right? We're going to start on a C here like this. So go ahead and start with your 2nd finger on the 3rd fret. Put your 1st finger on the 2nd fret of the D. Right? And this is a very common, right? And then you put your pinky all the way up on the D string on the 5th fret. And now this gets a little bit crazy because you have to go from the pinky here. And remember, we talked a lot about your pinky, learning to make sure that you keep him included. Don't leave him out. He wants to hang out with all the other cool kids, right? So make sure you don't leave him out and just go this way. We talked about that with the pentatonics last week and in the major scales the week before too. But we have to go from the pinky here to the 3rd finger here and then pinky here. If you find it difficult to get the pinky doing this movement right here, what you want to do is zoom in on the exact moment that's giving you problems and rehearse and get comfortable with that before you just play plow through the rest of the exercise. So for instance, what I would do if you're feeling that the pinky's a little bit awkward feeling there, I would start with the pinky here on the 5th fret of the D, and then I'd go to the 4th fret with my 3rd finger on the G, and then I'd go here. I'd go. And I know that sounds exactly like a song that you'll get stuck in your head for the next week. But it's a good exercise to just get comfortable with dun, 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 that movement, and making sure that these aren't kind of like, sort of flying out in outer space here. You want to keep the hands, my teacher years ago used to always say, keep your fingers close. The farther they are away from the fretboard, the longer the time it's going to take, and the longer the distance they have to get back to when you need them, right? So we're starting here, 2nd finger, 1st, 4th, and then your 3rd finger. And now, this is I like this part here, right here. Now we're going, this will be the 9th, right? The 9th is going to be the 2nd of the scale, 1 octave higher. So if I played a scale in 2 octaves, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? So that would be 2 octaves of a scale. The 9 is actually the 2nd, 1 octave higher. So I'd be going root, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. The 8th is the root again, and then 9, right? That's an octave higher. Adding this note in gives you a lot of color. Right? I really love adding those into almost anything. Or there's a really cool thing to the 9 that I really love. I have a course on Jamplay I did called Building Colorful Chords, which really focuses on exploring the 9ths and 7ths and 9ths and what are the possibilities with that. So check that out. All right, so we're going to go to the 9 here, and then I'll go your pinky on the B string, the 5th fret. Now here's where it gets a little crazy, which we have not done this before, a big stretch like this. You're going to put your 1st finger on the 3rd fret, and this is going to feel, oh my gosh, you have to go all the way up to the 7th fret. Yes, remember, check the 3 things: your elbow, your thumb position, and your wrist. And if you still feel like this is such a huge stretch, it's totally fine. The next thing you want to look at is how much you're favoring this side of your hand, the index side of your hand when you're playing. Because if you have the thumb and the elbow in the right position, what it does is sort of almost makes the 1st finger reach back to the note you need to get to. And that allows you freedom to grab this. Now, if you've gone through all of those processes and you're like, nope, Trevor, you're crazy, I am not reaching from the 3rd all the way up to the 7th fret, it's totally fine. Just jump, just leap for it. From here all the way up here and then go back down. That's totally fine. I don't have it listed as a pull-off in the tab. I would usually play it that way, but just to accommodate if that feels like too big of a stretch, we're just going to keep instead of having to keep both pressed so that you can do a pull-off, just pick them individually so you can hop. So the whole thing sounds like this. It's a really nice C major 9 arpeggio. Now when you come back down, watch what happens there. See how I went the pinky up here and then I went back down here? So even if you're just jumping and not stretching, that's fine, but you have to make sure you do your 4th finger on the next one. And then your 4th, 3rd, 4th, 1st finger, and then end there, all right? So make sure you're kind of almost pivoting right as your pinky's pressed to shift your hand back and forth, right? So let's try this at 60 beats per minute. And remember, if you have any questions as we're going through this about anything at all, please feel free to type them in, and Mr. Jason will let me know, and I will attempt to answer them for you. Okay, here we go. Ready? 1, 2, ready, go. again. One more time. Excellent. Now, if you're feeling a sense of frustration that we just went from a G major right in a row, now we're shifting all kinds of frets and stretching and all of these other things, that frustration that you feel, make peace with it. Make peace with it. Sometimes the frustration you feel as a guitar player can sort of make you just want to give up. And at that point, when you want to give up, your eyes start seeing all these other videos of all these amazing players, and you're like, oh, I can't play like that, can't play like that, can't play like that. Remember, this is just unfamiliar. It's not that you can't do it, you just haven't done it yet, right? So if you feel that sense of frustration, and I did want to challenge a little bit with some of these, and some of these will get a little bit more complex as we go on, but it's very important to make peace with that feeling. You're in a good spot, you're learning something new. Learn to make peace with that, and then you'll have a lifelong, flourishing relationship with music, and that's what you want, right? So let's jump, just as a little side note there, let's jump to D minor, number 4. And this one is sort of similar to what we did with A minor in that we kind of started with almost what was the pentatonic box from a previous week. But, right? And then this is going to end a little bit differently. So start with your first finger on the 5th fret of the A. And then your 4th finger is going to go up to the 8th fret on that same string. And then your 3rd finger goes to the 7 on the D. 1st finger on the G. And then all the way up here. We're doing a lot of things that are switching, going above the first 3 frets. So this might feel like uncharted territory, but you are up to the challenge, I can tell. Okay, so we have 1st, 4th, 3rd, 1st, 3rd, and then what you want to do is go 2nd finger is going to go on the B string on the 6th fret, and then your 1st finger all the way up on 5, and then we're going to go all the way up here to the 8th fret. And at this point, we have to make sure we finish it, because you can hear how it needs one more note. It's begging for a resolution. Right? And what we want to do is get back. That's our octave right there. That's our D. So we want to end there, but we're only going to shift this whole system from this region of the fretboard up to grab that one note and come back down. So you'll see in the tab it's listed as a 4 and then a 4 like that. So you can slide up, you can do whatever you want, you can hop, it doesn't matter. Just know that you don't have to reposition everything. We're only grabbing that one note and then coming right back to our general area. So again, 1st finger, 4th, 3rd, 1st, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, 4, 4, and then back, 4, 1, 2, 3, 3rd finger, not the 4th finger there, I was playing the major 7 one, and then to your 4th finger, and then back to your 1st there. All right, so let's try that together now at 60 beats per minute. 1, 2, ready, go. One more time. There you go. All right, so we have a couple of questions here. To help work through a hard spot, how often should I repeat the problem area, then move on, then come back, repeat the process? It's a great question, because if there's like one specific formula, the weird thing is like you have a problem area, your fingers just aren't working, and you grow frustration, you put it down for a day, you come back, and sometimes it just solves the problem. Sometimes taking time away from those sections will help solve the problem. So I usually never want to say like, all right, if you really, really want to get good at this, don't practice it, just take time away from it. But sometimes when you're drilling really, really hard and you're feeling frustrated and it's not happening, sometimes distance will help it. So you have to sort of just, each scenario will require different tools. Sometimes it's just lining up really, really slowly on a metronome just on that problem area. And then sometimes it's just putting the metronome as fast as you can and just playing the whole section and just hoping you breeze through the other part just to build the stamina in there. And then other times it's helpful to play it backwards. So take the problem measure and just actually play it backwards from where it's written. Sometimes your brain will make the connection from one of those, but you have to have sort of a set of tools in order to problem solve these. A lot of guitar playing is problem solving. So I hope that I don't want to beat around your answer there, because I want to answer it, but I don't want to give you just one formula. Know that sometimes even the things that seem to work on every other problem, they may not feel like they're working. So if you zoom in and just play that problem area over and over and over and over again, and then every time you put it back into the context, it just falls apart again. Sometimes you just have to zoom out and say, okay, maybe I need to play this at a different tempo. Maybe I need to just move this to a different spot on the fretboard, because sometimes you can get like a mental aggressive frustration that gets built into the muscle memory of that section, and you have to break that. So guitar playing is as much psychology as it is musical, you know. So my recommendation is to do it, keep doing it until you feel comfortable with it. And then maybe sit down, throw on a video, catch up on Stephen Colbert the night before the monologue, and just see if you can do a little bit of the muscle memory work after you've done the real good training of where the movements are. But just know that there's never one thing that will solve all of it. There are a couple different things that will get at it, but a lot of times the brain needs to go slow enough so that it can really catch one of those, and then you move on to the next problem, and there you go, it builds from there. I hope that makes sense. That's been my process, at least. Hi Trevor, I am almost done with your course, Crafting Fingerstyle Melodies. Sweet! That was my very first jam play course. Happy to say that I learned a lot. That arpeggio drill is my favorite exercise, all the best. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. If you haven't seen that course before, there's a whole bunch of other courses we're working on with jam play, but that was the very first one, and it's got a lot of these arpeggio ideas with finger picking in there, so check those out. So thank you so much for that. All right, so let's look at number 5. Pay attention to the time here. What I want to do in number 5 is this is an exercise that's from the Crafting Fingerstyle Melodies. We did it with more finger picking, but I really like this shape because it feels like it flows well with your left hand, and it's sort of outlining what a C chord would be. So if I did a C down here, right, and I just did it with like my second, third, and fourth like this, I'm sort of moving that up to the 7th fret, which just looks like a C like that. This is a G major. We're starting on the 3rd, so this is a G over B, which is a first inversion. You don't have to know that as much as there's a little more warmth when you start on the 3rd of a chord than when you just start here, right? This is a nice chord here, but if I start on the third, there's a little bit more of a character and warmth to it, so I tend to like that. So what you do is start with your first finger on the, this is another one, you can do the sweep picking for it or alternate picking, either one. I did say at the beginning, I think that was the only other, this will be the only other one with sweep picking. I forgot about that. Okay, so first finger on the 7th fret of the E, and then your 4th finger goes to the A string, right, on the 10th fret. And again, if this is frustrating you, that's okay. Take your time with it, and remember to check your thumb, your wrist, and your elbow. Make sure all those are free and not in some death grip, you know, trying to hold on for dear life. If you have your guitar in a proper sitting position, your pick is relaxed, you got a nice drink in front of you, it's okay. Just chill, you know, it's all right. So get in that relaxed position. Right, so we're gonna go first finger, and then your 4th finger, and then your 3rd finger is going to go on the D on the 9th fret. Your first finger is going to go up here, your 2nd finger, your 1st finger on the 7th, and then all the way up to 10. And then from here, we're going to do a pull off like this. So this is a little bit easier than stretching up here, all right, that we did on one of the previous ones, but on this one, that should be a little bit easier. And if it's not, remember, check those other 3 things: wrist, thumb, elbow. And then we're going to go back down the 8th, then the 7th, your 3rd finger on the 9th, and 10. And what's different about this one than a lot of the other ones, the first, it's similar to the first one in that we're only playing 1 note per string, right? I tend to like to do things like that because I like that sound to be, it's jumping up the chord tones, it's jumping up the arpeggio very quickly as opposed to, right? I like that sound. All right, so we're gonna go at 60 beats per minute. Let's try that. 1, 2, ready, go. Now up, pull off, up, 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 down. So that's our pick direction. Down, 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 up, pull off, up, 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 down, 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 up, pull off, up, 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 down, down. Excellent. So that's a really fun exercise, and I don't want to blow past it too quickly, but I just want to let you know, highlight that. That's a good one to work on. I use that all over the place, and I have so many different exercises that have sort of, this is like the parent exercise, and there's many offspring that have come from that one. So I enjoy that one. Now, the last 3, these are really cool. So we started with our 1 octave, right? We did our 2 octave, right? When we did the, we got to, right, 2 octaves of that. Now what we want to do is a G major 7 arpeggio, but we're going to do it in 3 octaves. So if you remember, we talked about this in the major scale lesson, as well as the pentatonic lesson, is that if you know where your octaves are, you can play the same thing in 3 different octaves. And knowing where your octaves are allow you to sort of hop back and forth. So to get to the next octave, you'd start on this string here, and then you'd go, right, you go up 2 strings over 2 frets, and that's getting to our next pitch 1 octave higher. We've gone through the whole scale, and that's where it starts over again. And then we go from here to get to the next one. You're going to go down, up 2 strings. Now this, you have to go over 3 frets because of the B string. Everything gets shifted 1. Right? So now what we're doing is we're going to just take those three identical octaves, and we're going to play the same pattern. So we're going to start with your first finger on the 2nd fret, and the pattern is going to go 1, 2, 1, 4, right? So and that'll be on the 2nd fret 3rd, 2nd fret 5th. So, and then you keep that same exact thing going and just shift here and do the same thing. So the first finger now goes to the 4th fret because we started here on the 2nd. So up 2, over 2. So we have, and now this is where it gets a little bit weird because your pinky's here and we sort of pivot so that your first finger goes here. That switch right there is the most difficult. And if you get frustrated by it and feel like, this is hard, it's because it is. That's okay. But listen to the payoff of the work. It's a really nice G major 7 sound. Okay, so what we're going to do here is at 60 beats per minute, and you'll notice that we're playing the top note twice. As soon as we get to that top note, we're going to play it again in order to descend. And then we play that last note, we're going to play that twice in order to ascend again. So it sounds like that. Now, and then, right, so that's what repeats the whole thing. So if you hear doubles in there, that's why. Okay. 1, 2, ready, go. Down. Again. All right, so our G major 7 there. The next one is doing that same concept, but we're doing it in instead of starting on the root, we're actually starting on the 7th here with this one. We're actually going to start on the 3rd of the chord, because remember, the 3rd has that really nice warm sound to it, and I really like this pattern. It's a little bit harder to play, but again, with a lot of these arpeggios, they can feel difficult to play, but they're so much fun to really practice, and they sound so nice that it's sort of, the payoff is in there. There's enjoyment along the way, you know. So this is one of my favorite ones to practice. So start with your first finger here, and then you're going to go up to the 10th fret with your pinky, and then 3rd. Right? So instead of going fingers 1, 2, 1, 4, we're going 1, 4, 3, 4. Okay? So 1, 4, 3, 4. Now we have to shift up to the next octave. So remember, down 2, over 2. And now we have to go down 2, over 3, because remember the B string, everything shifts 1. Okay? So you have 1, 4, 3, 4, new octave, 1, 4, 3, 4, new octave, 1, 4, 3, 4, and now on our way back down, I find this to be the hardest because you're leading with the pinky. So remember all the work we talked about with the pinky, making sure that he's not left out. This is why, this is his moment to shine. You want him to be ready and confident. And you can't do that if you ignore him all the time. And then, So on your way back down, you're going to start with the G here. And we're doing that same thing that we did before, where you have to sort of pivot from, you know, your first finger's here, but now we have to do the very next note is the pinky on that same fret, but a different string there. That can be a little bit tricky, so practice that move, right? Get comfortable with the move. A lot of times what is really, really difficult is not taking the time to problem solve while you're learning it the first time. So your brain automatically labels that as, I have no idea what to do with that part, and it's always going to be hard, you know, thank you, you're welcome. So you want to make sure that you go slow enough to problem solve the very first time you learn it, and that can really help solve some frustration too. So pinky, first, pinky, third, pinky, first, pinky, third, pinky, first. Okay, so we have, right, then shift, next octave, next octave, and then we'll do the same thing that we did before, where you double the top and the bottom ones to keep the loop going. Down, up, and then shift, then shift. All right, so let's try this together at 60 beats per minute. And if in any way you feel that you feel like you're getting frustrated, or some of this is a little bit too difficult, just take a small section of it. A small little section will really help. Instead of trying to do the entire thing, just break it down into a smaller chunk. Just do this. It's totally fine, because you're still getting used to the pattern and you can shift it later. Okay, here we go. 60 beats per minute. One, two, ready, go. All right, so for the very last one, and let me know if you have any other questions as we start to wind down here. The very last one is just combining those last two into one exercise. We're going to shift where we play this. We're going to put that down here on the 10th fret. All right, and what we're doing here is we're going to be ascending in a G major 7 and descending on a D major 7. So we're basically going, right? So that nice sound. All right, so we're going to start here with the same exact way we did on the previous one for the G major 7. 1, 2, 1, 4. Next octave, 1, 2, 1, 4. Next octave, 1, 2, 1, 4. All right. I love this 3-octave thing because all of a sudden the fretboard seems to come together and click in a way that I didn't have it before. Hopefully you're starting to shine a flashlight on some of the dark areas of the fretboard that always felt a little like, I'm not going to use whatever metaphor you want. The water's too deep on that side of the pool, or I've never been in that room. There's no electricity in that part of the fretboard. No, now you have your flashlight. Now you're starting to see patterns. Every possible mixed metaphor, I hope one of them clicks for you. But the idea of having 3 octaves of doing the same thing allow you to move up and down the fretboard, and that really gains some confidence and familiarity. Now, after we've gone up to here, what we did in the previous exercise is we would start on this note and go back down where we started. But what we're going to do now is, as we get all the way up to this note, now we're going to do this one. Okay? But we're going to do it here. So, right? So the top, the sort of turnaround part, is as we're ascending and then descending, you're going to go. And then you go down to the next octave. All right? And this is a very nice sounding exercise. A very nice sound right there. Right, and those are those major 9 chords. You got to do that chords, the building colorful chords. We'll go through those ones there. So let's try this together slowly at 60 beats per minute. 1, 2, ready, go. That's where we switch. 4, 3, 4, 1. Again. 1, 2, 1, 4. Back to G major 7. Then D major 7. Let's see how I'm pivoting from there. Let's try it again. All right, so we went through some more complex things than we had done in previous lessons, but I wanted to show you some of the beautiful things that you can do when things are a little bit more complex, but they're really fun to listen to and really fun to play. That can really help ignite, keep your will ignited to keep going, right? The last thing you want to do, again, is just repeat the same things that you've played over and over, and that's why you're here. The Guitar Gym for Rookies is here about reigniting that, and also what to do, what to practice, how to practice smart and keep your will engaged and also progress as you go. So we did the Arpeggios today. We're going to be in these final few weeks, we're winding down with playing with others, some expressive qualities, and as well as some finger picking basics, how to get a handle on that. So make sure you tune in same time next week. It's been a blast. Stay inspired, my friends, and I will see you next time. Bye.